Welcome to the Mish / Freely Roaming podcast.
What's the official name? We made it
The official name now. So this is episode 14 of the Mish podcast, but it's being rebranded during this episode to become the Freely Roaming podcast with Mish. I guess there's a few reasons for that. I don't know. We can go through the explanation now, or do you want to catch people up to date with what we've been doing first? Or before we do the rebrand discussion?
Who are we? What are we doing?
Yeah. Well, I guess
everybody knows who we are. Maybe not.
Unless they're coming from Freely Roaming.
That's
which
true.
They should know who we are, because we've been promoting it through Mish, but they could also have found Freely Roaming through our YouTube channel and our blog, because the blog now has a few posts, and some of the posts have gotten a fair amount of traffic, so I think there's a decent amount of people that are subscribing to our newsletter, which we're also going to start sending out now that there's a decent subscriber base. Okay, but let's just go through. For those of you that don't know about this podcast, this was the Mish podcast, which we've done 13 episodes of, and we started doing that about a year and a half ago, roughly.
I think we started in the
almost
hotel
2 years
room
ago
in DC before we flew here.
Oh, that's right. So more than 2 years ago now. So the first year we did 13 episodes because our last episode 13, was the 1 year anniversary of our time in Europe, which was September 2019. So this last year has been pretty crazy, to say the least. Most of you guys know. So we've sort of taken a small hiatus after our first 13 episodes. But now we're back. And what we started doing last year, when we came back to Croatia in the wintertime, November, December, is we started this Freely Roaming project. So Freely Roaming, for those of you that are here for Freely Roaming, you know that this is a channel on YouTube, a blog at freelyroaming.com. This is how we're using this as a platform to show people our experiences traveling the world by land. Mm-hmm. Down the line, we'll most likely do different types of traveling as well. But for the last 12 years, we've been traveling by land in 4 different campers. And a lot of people have asked us questions about how do we do this, about homeschooling, about raising children on the road, about making money, how we find campsites, how we cook and how we shower, how we do all this stuff.
Yeah, all the questions.
Yeah, so there's been just hundreds and hundreds of questions. And instead of answering each and every one, what we decided to do is kind of centralize all these questions and answer them on this forum, which is freelyroaming.com. And because we are already doing a podcast, we felt like that it was kind of a good idea to just consolidate our efforts both in Mish and Freely Roaming into a Freely Roaming podcast.
Right. It's kind of hard to separate sometimes our lives and our advice. It happens together. So
right.
It makes sense that the podcast...
And also, I think the name Freely Roaming is more logical. It's something that people can see and it makes sense what it means. Whereas if somebody sees a Mish podcast, they may say, "Oh, I don't know what that is. I'm not interested." So, Freely Roaming podcast with Mish is what this will become. The previous 13 episodes have been about our experiences traveling Europe. Mm-hmm. But going forward, we're going to include more stuff than just that. Mm-hmm. We're still going to try to nail down a sort of a style and also maybe segments that we'll cover with every episode. But it's going to cover a variety of things, including the places that we've been, places that we like, how-tos of certain topics about living this lifestyle. It could include interviews with people that we meet on the road or have met in the past. It could be interviews that we do via Skype or Zoom or, FaceTime or whatever. So we want to take this opportunity to get this out there to the people who have already been listening to our Molly Mish podcast, in that this is not a different podcast. We're just rebranding it now. Now it's called the Freely Roaming Podcast.
With Molly Mish.
With Molly Mish. Right? It's a mouthful, but I think ultimately it will be known in shorthand as the Freely Roaming Podcast.
Yeah.
It's a podcast about living the modern nomadic life. So we're going to be sharing a whole bunch of stuff. And then the other thing that will happen too in this podcast is that once we figure out the segments that we're going to cover, because in Freely Roaming, we have several categories of topics that we wanted to cover. Things that include like building your adventure mobile, homeschooling.
All right.
Let's see, what are all the other ones?
Where's your list, Dan? I think it's in the hamburger.
Yeah, how can we? Simplifying your life, financial independence, planning your trip. And these are all different topics. And also, like, you know, within each of those topics, there could be subcategories that we can get into a little bit more detail. So we'll go into all these details within these topics in different episodes. But then what will be really nice, too, is that if you guys have questions, you can ask them in our blog or on our YouTube channel. And some of these, we're going to also do videos now for these podcasts, I think. I don't know how exactly this will evolve, but hopefully the video quality will be good enough and the audio quality will be good enough for the audio to stand alone by itself. Because when we upload it to the podcast feed, it's just going to be audio.
Right.
And if when we upload it to YouTube, it's going to be both video and audio. So we're hoping that we can get a good enough setup where both will sound like the way we want it to. So yeah, so that's the new rebrand, and I hope you guys like it. And if you guys have any questions about the topics you want us to cover, go ahead and ask them in our blog or in the comments below if you've seen this on YouTube. If you haven't been to our new Freely Roaming website, it's freelyroaming.com. Our YouTube channel for that is youtube.com/freelyroaming.
And on
what else do we have?
Instagram too, we are freely.roaming on Instagram.
Instagram.com/freely.roaming.
I believe the same thing for Twitter, but underscore.
And we also have a Pinterest for this.
Pinterest, yeah.
Anyways, if you go to freelyroaming.com, you'll find links for all of that.
And Patreon. Don't forget
Patreon. And Patreon. We do have a separate Patreon for Freely Roaming compared to Molly Mish. There is a secret channel where I upload behind the scenes videos for our patrons only. So if you're interested in seeing more stuff like that, you can go find us on patreon.com/freelyroaming. Or if you want to support the Molly Mish side, it's patreon.com/mollymish. So that's it. That's the update we want to give you guys in this short but important episode of the new Freely Roaming podcast with Molly Mish.
Is it with Molly Mish or by Molly Mish? With.
Now everybody's confused. With. It's going to be with.
With. Okay.
With Molly Mish.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you guys for participating, listening, watching, however you're consuming this. We'll see you guys in the next one.
Bye.